Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Rayford. I will be moderating tonight's event. Tonight's event is around code enforcement. We did a poll on the Nextdoor app, and we found that majority of our citizens want to know about code enforcement out of all the topics, primarily code enforcement around commercial buildings. We did take a brief break while the elections were going on, but we're back doing the town halls, basically to keep connected with the community, let them know what's going on with DCM, and also find out community concerns similar tonight so we can address them with individuals that are experts in these fields. Tonight we have Deputy Director Timothy Hardy on to talk about the code enforcement and give a little background about code enforcement, the difference between code enforcement and code compliance. We also want to look about the status of code enforcement. And at the end of this, we hope to find out where we can help as a community member to help improve code enforcement and decrease on the number of guys, whether it's cutting our grass, maintaining our areas. The biggest reason that code enforcement and may have been a top issue for the individuals and the community members in Nextdoor is because code enforcement is basically the beautification of our neighborhoods. We buy homes, we want to make sure that they stay up to par, whether that's our neighbors cutting their grass, trashing areas. So we want to make sure that we're doing all that we can to comply with code enforcement. That way we decrease the level of complaints that we have and also make sure that we have complaints that are adequate that code enforcement can handle and keeping our community property values at a steady level without increasing other aspects or decreasing the values of our homes. So if Mr. Timothy Hardy would like to take a brief second to introduce himself, and then he will also tell you a little bit about code.
All right, thank you, sir, and I certainly appreciate the invite. Ms. Rice, thank you for inviting me to attend. Unfortunately, Ms. Hines had another engagement tomorrow, so we kind of swapped spots, but I think your preference was for me to be here anyway. So I'm happy to oblige. As the gentleman said, my name is Timothy Hardy. I am the Deputy Director for Code Compliance for DeKalb County. I have been in this job now about 3.5 years. My background is primarily in criminal justice. I have worked in several municipalities throughout Metro Atlanta. I kind of cut my teeth as a young code officer in Fulton County. Spent a couple of 3 years in Atlanta, Sandy Springs for 2 years after that, and then spent the last 7 years prior to coming to DeKalb in the city of Smyrna. So I've been in the code enforcement arena field for approximately 24 years. So I have a wealth of experience, but I would tell you with this job, there's always something new to learn. You know, each day brings a new experience just with new people. And I think the officers that are out there on the front line now would tell you the same thing. But as far as code enforcement with DeKalb County, we have a staff of about 57 people. 43 of those folks are on the front line, code enforcement officers out in the field, making inspections and trying to correct violations. Our department roughly funded at about $5 million a year. You know, as like everybody else, I think, you know, everybody always thinks they can use a little bit more money, but the administration has been very focused on what we do, and as a result have provided us resources to make that happen. Since the COVID pandemic, you know, of course, we had to kind of change the way we work a little bit. We are now back to full service, meaning all our people are at work every day. We still adjust our in-office schedules a little bit, just since COVID is still hadn't quite left us yet. We are in the process of a move from 1807 Candler to 178 Sam. And as a matter of fact, our specific address is going to be 180 Sam Street, Suite B100. That building won't be open to the public probably for another 30 to 45 days, but it's certainly coming. The physical move for us will probably take place in maybe the next 2 weeks or so. I filled some questions that came in prior to. I can go into some of that if you like, or the moderator, are you prepared to, I guess, go down those questions, a list of them, or do you just want me to get into what the questions were and what our responses are?
Oh, you can get into the questions, but I wanted to say something real quick, something I missed in the introduction. If anyone has a question, as soon as he gets done going through the question that we've already pre-generated, which came from next door, you can put them down in Q&A, and after we get done with those questions, we will answer the Q&A questions. And does that work for you, Mr. Hardy?
Yep, that works for me.
All right, so you can go ahead and get the question that we've already pre-sent.
Okay, so the first question was number of positions. I think I touched on that earlier. We have 43 officers. We have 57 positions in the department. The next question was how many cases the department has. I would have to be upfront with you on that. The data is somewhat unreliable, but I can tell you that we feel probably anywhere from 800 plus complaints a month. Just in the month of May, we closed about 730 cases. We received another 1,300 plus service requests. So this is like the peak season for code enforcement, meaning when the grass starts growing, the number of service requests we get increase probably by about 20 to 25%. We'll see a slight decrease in that around October when the grass stops growing. But you know, the average is around 800 cases per month. If I can just go down this list a little bit, how many cases are in court? We recently, I want to say we had about a little over 3,600 cases in court year to date. Now, just so I can kind of give you some insight on court cases. Each case or each citation that we write, the court considers that a case. And each individual has to face each count or each ticket that they're given. And that's how we count those cases. And again, as of year to date, we have about 3,600 court cases. Some have been adjudicated, some are still pending. We have quite a backlog of court cases that need to come forward. Some have been bound over to state court per the request of the violator. If anybody decides they want a jury trial or they want a bench trial and they don't want the magistrate court to hear it, they can ask for it to be bound over. Most of the backlog was accumulated during the pandemic, of course. The courts were closed for almost a year. We started having some virtual hearings. Now we're back to in-person hearing. All of those cases are heard in magistrate court over on Camp Road. Courtroom if I'm not mistaken. Anybody is welcome to attend. Now, there are some COVID protocols. I mean, they have like an overflow room that any interested parties can sit and view it on a monitor. The solicitor that prosecutes our cases primarily is Ms. Karen Kenner Scott. Anytime there's any kind of victim impact statement that someone wants to make or they want to be heard, she's the person to contact. Once we issue those citations, they are hers to adjudicate. What percentage of officers in South DeKalb? Well, let me just start by saying North DeKalb, we only have about 4 areas identified. Right now, we have 3 officers in those 4 areas. So if you do the math, you've got 43 officers in the field. That's a minute amount of enforcement coverage we have in the northern area. So that means everybody else is either in South DeKalb or East DeKalb. You know, so that should give you some idea as to how we employ our people. The areas up north are a little bit wider, just because we get the volume is less, and of course we get a higher volume in South DeKalb, and we put more people in that area. That's just kind of the simple way that we deploy our staff. The next question we got was what type of technology does the department use? Right now, that's part of the reason that the data is unreliable. We actually have 3 systems that we depend on, and it's primarily based on the decisions that were made back in 2014, 2015, when DeKalb County moved to the Hanson system. They were already using Hanson to some extent. They upgraded to Hanson 7. Later on in 2018, upgraded to Hanson 18. At no point was the code enforcement requirements figured into all of that. So we kind of had to, stick a square peg in a round hole, meaning we had to have some workarounds. We started using an app called Esri, and it's called Survey 123, and it's just an inspection tool that our guys use in the field. It's an automated tool. The inspections are made on a tablet and then uploaded via email to our back office staff or our administrative staff. They didn't take that information and they cut and paste it and put it into our system of record, which is Hanson. And that's all a manual process. So as you can see, we can kind of get backlogged quite a bit having to use those manual process. Another tool we use is called Workforce, and it's just a scheduler. When the complaints come into our central call center, which is 311, they're then assigned to an area, and there's an officer assigned to that area. So that officer will get that complaint, and then Workforce will kind of schedule it accordingly. Another system that we depend on, but we don't actually use a lot, is the court system. Magistrate Court uses something they call Benchmark. It's a Pioneer product. But again, our system of record, Hanson, does not talk to Benchmark. It does not interface. That's something that we are feverishly working on going into this end of this fiscal year. We have purchased a product called Hanson Mobile. It should eliminate all of the manual processes, meaning once we make an inspection now and upload that information, it goes directly into Hanson. It's been a long time coming, but we feel we're kind of excited to have that tool and to get away from some of the manual processes. How can we make code enforcement in South DeKalb better? What I would say is it will allow us to make the corrections that we need to make, allow us to move away from some of the manual processes we have, allow us to implement Hanson Mobile. We think we'll be much more efficient without having to cut and paste information and put it into our system of record. And as always, the citizens play a key part. 90% of what we do is complaint generated, meaning someone's calling it in and then we're going out and chasing those complaints. The gentleman earlier mentioned something about the commercial corridors. One of the things I did shortly after arriving in 2018 is in mid-2019, I put together what I call a comprehensive commercial corridor inspection team. It's a team of about 5 officers and a supervisor. Their primary focus is on all of the commercial corridors. And we tend to make those inspections or those compliance actions premature, or at least we try to get in front of them. We schedule sweeps from time to time. The goal for that particular process and for that team is to touch all of the businesses along the commercial corridors in DeKalb County over a 5-year period. Now, we've been slowed a little bit because of COVID, because we kind of had to switch how we inspect and have some priority inspections, but we're back to doing our sweeps. We completed the sweep on Memorial Drive back in 2018. We completed a sweep on Candler Road in 2019. We were probably about a third of the way done with Glenwood when the pandemic hit. So we'll get back to Glenwood, and then we'll make our way to all of the other commercial corridors. Now that team also handles the complaints that come in. So anytime there's a commercial complaint, it's funneled to that supervisor, and he makes those assignments accordingly. We try to work with that group as a team. We've just found that we're much more efficient if we can deploy everybody to a particular location on a particular day. Specifically, when you're looking at the multi-tenant sites, some of the strip malls and things of that nature, it's just easy to touch all of those businesses. One of the primary things we're looking for when we visit those businesses is current business license. We find that over the years, some of the businesses, or quite a few of the businesses, are operating without a license and haven't had a license in the last 2 or 3 years. So that's one of the final things, one of the first things we look for. Now, it's a comprehensive inspection. We start on the exterior, we look at signage, we look at the trash receptacles, any kind of enclosures associated with that, parking surfaces, walking surfaces, facades of the building. And then we go inside. When we look inside, we're primarily looking for any kind of deficiencies, such as stains on the ceiling tiles that would indicate a leak, any kind of plumbing or HVAC violations that may jump out at us. So it's a complete inspection. That group, I think, is performing well, and we're looking forward to getting back to specifically what we do. I see some hands, and I think we'll get to those questions. I'm just trying to get through the initial ones. How can the residents help? Continue to report violations, continue to talk to your neighbors, try to educate them on code enforcement. When you have new folks move into the neighborhood, even if you don't have an HOA, it might be a good idea just, to have some conversations. Maybe have some monthly or quarterly meetings in the community just to talk about things that you see that are related to code enforcement. Of course, once we get involved, it becomes an enforcement action at that point. And now that I mentioned enforcement action, there was one question about what is code compliance versus code enforcement. From an industry standard, both of the terms are interchangeable. Well, but with DeKalb County, prior to me arriving, and since I've been here, our focus has been more on education and compliance. If you walk into any of the courtrooms and listen to any of the cases, that's one of the first things that the solicitor will tell you, and one of the first things that the judge will tell you. Code enforcement, the enforcement piece is just that. That's the core process of issuing notices, issuing citations, and then getting the violator in front of a judge, if it comes to that. And unfortunately, a lot of times it does. That's when we have to send that citation to the solicitor's office. The solicitor's office then prosecute that case. But it's important to know that the code enforcement officer or the code enforcement office does not have a role other than a witness in that case. We don't decide what the fine amounts are. We don't even have a suggestion as to what the fine amounts are. Solicitor typically handles that in what they call negotiated pleas. Again, if anybody wants to have a trial, that case will then be bound over to state court. But at the end of the day, the judge decides what that fine will be, what those penal measures will be. There is a whole gamut of measures that are available to us. Any violation could be fined anywhere from $1 to $1,000 per day per violation. And there's a 6-month jail time that's tied to any of those quasi-criminal citations. Now, I think we all know, you rarely see any jail time at all in code enforcement. There may have been 1 or 2 occasions that I can remember where someone just didn't show up and they decided to issue a bench warrant. There might be a couple of days in jail then, but that rarely happened. Since the pandemic started, bench warrants are non-existent. Hopefully we can get back to that, because that just takes a lot of the fear of compliance out of the equation when you're not issuing bench warrants for folks that just don't show up to court.
And we can move into the questions. And thank you, Mr. Hardy, for going through the pre-sent questions. And then we're gonna move into the question that came in the chat. And prior to that, I just want to inform everyone that the panelists here or the panelists that come to these meetings are not for or against cityhood when we're asking questions. But at this point, we're going to move to the question part. If you weren't here earlier when I stated it, if you see down below, it says Q&A. That's where you can put your questions, and we're going to move into that. The first question, and I will also state your name with the question if you want to not your name not stated, and I know it's a little like put in parentheses anonymous. And I just want to give everybody credit for that question. So our first question comes from Ms. Rhonda Magnum. Is code enforcement still a part of Keep DeKalb Beautiful? And I'm gonna two-part this. Can residents still adopt the area in DeKalb County?
So the first answer to the first part of the question is no. Keep DeKalb Beautiful and code enforcement were part of an umbrella department called beautification. That department existed when I got here, but was later dissolved, I'm sorry. And Keep DeKalb Beautiful was folded under the umbrella of sanitation. So that part of the agency now reports to Ms. Hutchison and sanitation. They still deploy folks out to clean up the right of way and things of that nature, but they're no longer part of our administration. So just to make it clear, beautification doesn't exist anymore. Code enforcement now is a standalone administration, which I oversee. To Keep DeKalb Beautiful, of course, you can still call in, service requests the same way, but they report to the sanitation director now.
And then I am, and then the second part of that question was, can you still adopt, or was that Keep DeKalb Beautiful, adopting the area?
Yeah, that's part of Keep DeKalb Beautiful, and they will be able to answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then this is from Ms. Chavez Grayer, and she asked, are the officers assigned to Southern and East DeKalb because they are predominantly unincorporated areas when you're stating 3 were in North and then the rest were primarily in Southern and East?
So just to be transparent, we only handle unincorporated areas, meaning we only enforce in unincorporated DeKalb. Of course, there are unincorporated areas in South DeKalb, East DeKalb, as well as North DeKalb. So in those incorporated areas, that's kind of how we deploy our folks. If you wanted to kind of get, I guess, a weighted version of where the people are, there are more in the South, there's a few more in the East, and then there are very few in the North. And I include Central DeKalb with more of the East DeKalb.
Okay. And then she also had a question. You stated that 90% of cases were complaint generated. The other percent, how are those cases initiated?
Those are our proactive inspections by our commercial quarter team, as well as our multifamily enforcement team. We have another specialized team that only looks at multifamily, which are apartments, and hotel motels. That team generates primarily proactive inspections. There are complaints that they handle as well. So that other 10% that I'm talking, that's handled by the quarter team as well as the multifamily team.
Mm-hmm. And then Lloyd Nurse asked, panhandling a homeless person with shopping carts is a concern to our communities. How can that code enforcement help?
Code enforcement can help there, unfortunately, because that happens in the public right of way. That's a issue for the DeKalb County Police. So I would encourage you to make that call to the DeKalb County Police. Remember, code enforcement only enforces infractions on private property. That's both commercial and residential and non-residential. But we don't enforce on anything in the public right of way. The one exception are commercial vehicles that may be parked on the street in a residential area.
And that we actually had a question around that. The tractor trailers parked in the residential communities.
It's a clear violation, and please continue to call us when it happens. Now, of course, we have to catch them. We have to be there, be able to photograph them and then get them a citation. But that's something we enforce strictly, and there's no shortage of the number of calls we get across DeKalb County for that type of infraction.
And one of the questions was early on, the process of why you all are why is code enforcement relocating?
There are a couple of reasons. One is that the building we're moving to is a county-owned building. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the building DFAX used to be in over off Sam Street. That's where we're moving to. DFAX moved a little more than a year and a half ago. So we had a building there. Really, it's two buildings. You had a front side of the building and a back side of the building that the county owns that was sitting empty. And then you had various agencies throughout DeKalb County that were paying rent to to occupy certain buildings throughout the county. So it just made sense to move those agencies that were paying rent to a county-owned building. Now, there's some costs to building it out the way we want to. For instance, planning sustainability, GIS, and to some extent, community development, they were all paying rent in buildings over at 330 and another building off of Commerce. So they will be occupying primarily the front part of that building. They have now what they call a one-stop shop on the main floor there. So when you go in to get your permit, your business license, apply for variances, all things associated with land development will be done at that one-stop shop. So again, you get out of a lease where you're paying rent at 330 Ponce, and now you're in a building that the county owns. So once you get past that initial investment of the build out, you're not paying rent anymore.
And I'm gonna circle back to the tractor trailer because it was the second part to it. They were asking just if they're in the residential areas overnight, should they send photos to the code enforcement?
Photos always help, folks. Believe me, they do. It's just that we can't issue a citation based on your photo, meaning we have to document it in our system with our camera, with our equipment before we issue that citation. But it does help us because it gives us some context as to when they're there. It would help if there's a timestamp on your photo, and you might not be able to do that. If you email it right away, it gives us an idea. But yes, it's always helpful to have a photo. And try to get an address close to where it's parking. Particularly on some of the major collectors, these are long streets. So if you just tell us it's on Covington Highway or off of Covington Highway on a certain street, that's not gonna help us much. But if you can maybe get an address of what across from or next to, that just helps us pinpoint the location when we go out to look for it.
And then I'm gonna piggyback off of that question. If you just briefly describe for individuals that may not know how to file a complaint, which website they need to go to, and how that process goes.
So if you go to the county's website, main website, there's always a link for code enforcement. For code enforcement, of course, it has its own website. The easiest way to file a complaint is to call 311. Our 311 operators handles the major portion of our intake. They'll take that information, try to get as much pertinent details as they can, and then they'll forward that information on to the area officer through our system. They'll make that assignment in Hanson, and then it goes to that area officer. That's the easiest way. You can always call our main number, which is 404-687-3700. That number still works. And again, the website is usually pretty easy to navigate. I would tell you though, with the website, because of the dynamic portal and some of the issues we've been having with it, if you don't put an address in, it's probably never going to make it to a service request, because the address drives everything in code enforcement. Whereas if you call our 311 and you're not sure on the address, but you know what it's close to, you can give them that information, over the phone, and they can be able to look at the GIS map and at least get the officer close.
And that leads into the next question from Ms. April Thomas. the automation from the automated versus the manual entry process. What is there any entity that's preventing that transition, and is there a reason that it's being slowed down?
Clearly, there are no entities now that are preventing that transition, but we're going through the development of that now. Why it was in place before I got here, that's not a question I can answer. From what I'm told or the information I've gotten over the years, it's just that when they were focused, meaning DeKalb County, when we were focused on bringing in Hanson, code enforcement was just not a priority. And as a result, they did not, go through all of the requirements for code enforcement. They basically gave them a module and say, hey, here, work with it. And that's proven not to be ideal. My understanding also is that IT was not necessarily involved. We had someone that was driving the process and kind of kept them out of the loop. And I think that's a mistake. Right now, IT is thoroughly involved in our development and implementation. We've made it very clear that we expect that we'll be up and running by the first quarter of 2023. So there's nothing blocking it now. It's just that we have to go through the development stage, then some testing, and then implementation.
And then keeping it on technology, is there a way for the public to track the complaint they put in?
Now or in the future? Right now, that ability is severely hampered just because of the way the dynamic portal works. Part of what the new system will do, it will give them a way to find updates. Now, it may not go into detail as, hey, I found 3 junk vehicles and the grass was high, but it will say violations were found and give you a status if a notice was issued, what the compliance date might be, or what the next reinspection date might be, or if citations were issued and what that next court date. It'll kind of give you periodic status updates of that complaint, and you'll be able to go online and find that based on the service request number or the case number.
And then with abandoned buildings, is code enforcement responsible for citing those buildings, or does that fall under another entity?
No, that's us. Anything that's private property, if it's abandoned, we deal with it. One of the things that I haven't mentioned that's a big part of what we do is our MRIM nuisance abatement program. That's demolition and abatement. We have a robust pipeline of buildings and structures that have been abandoned at some point or just non-compliant or in some level of deterioration. And we could not get any traction, and we moved those cases to our law department. They then file what we call the in-rem action with the magistrate court, and then there are hearings held against the property. That's what in-rem means. So we file a notice of list pendants initially when the case it goes to the law department, and then there's a lien filed on that property once the work is done. We're getting back to demolitions. Prior to the pandemic, we had demoed in excess of 400 buildings. Either the county demoed it or was responsible for having the owner to demo it. And we've abated, a great number of buildings as well. All of that stopped when the courts stopped meeting. Courts are meeting again now. We are back to demoing and abating buildings. I think we've done maybe 12 or so year to date. And again, we have plenty in the pipeline, and you'll start seeing some news briefs about upcoming demos. So stay tuned. But that's one of our best tools in our toolbox, is to be able to abate and demolish problem buildings and place a lien on.
And in the same vein, is there a list of those abandoned buildings where if residents wanted to purchase those abandoned properties, would the code enforcement have that list? Or
well, that's a how do you put it? That's an ethics issue, meaning I can't give you locations that you're looking to buy. Because then it looks like code enforcement is trying to force the property owner to sell by starting enforcement action. That's just not a list that we share with the public. I will say this, and this is public knowledge, every third Thursday at 1 o'clock, there are in-rem hearings in the magistrate court. If somebody wants to come and sit on the back pew and listen to those hearings, it's open to the public. But I'm not going to prepare and hand over a list to anyone. I'm just not going to put myself in that position.
I understand. And then and we were talking about the 10% of cases that were unfiled. Is there an agent that goes around, or agents that go around and survey streets that might file violations that haven't been complaints haven't been filed for?
Okay, so let me just describe, let's explain the 90% versus the 10%. When I say 90% of it is complaint generated, that's 90% of what we receive. The other 10% we're finding on our own. But there is that segment of properties out there that are not reported for whatever reason. That's why I say, people in the community need to be real diligent about, if you see it, call it in, report it to us. With 43 officers, but 7,400 something parcels, you're not going to catch them all. But I tell you one thing we did in 2019 is we did what we call a comprehensive properties survey inspection by cyclomedia, and we looked at every parcel. And from that, we were able to identify about 212 properties that met what we call category 4 or 5. We ranked properties for the purpose of this survey from 1 to 5, 1 being a vacant property that might be overgrown, 2 being vacant property might be overgrown with trash and debris and that kind of thing. 3 would be a property that had a structure, but only had some exterior violations. And then you get into your 4s and 5s that are distressed, meaning they're either in danger of collapse or unfit for human habitation, things of that nature. Those are the ones we identify first for our in-rem program. And from that, again, we've established a pretty robust pipeline that will keep flowing through the law department, and hopefully we'll get to abatement or demolition. Ideally, before we get to a court date, somebody will stand up and say, "Hey, oh, that's my property. I'll fix it." Because if the idea is, if they don't fix it, then they're going to have to pay the county for fixing it or for knocking it down. But that's what I mean by the 90 and 10.
And I'm gonna run through a list of different participants as a couple of different questions, but I'm gonna put them all together. Reporting, can citizens report their neighbor's tree that's close to their house, cars parked on lawns, and then I guess the open barbecue selling fish plates in front of public residents?
So, all right, first one, trees. Trees are tricky because any tree on your property is your responsibility. Any tree on your neighbor's property is your neighbor's responsibility. But if you have a tree or your neighbor has a tree and any part of that tree is encroaching, say, over your fence line and you want to cut it, it's fair game. You can cut it. There's no violation or it's not illegal. Now, if you think that that tree is dead or dying and it's potentially will fail and damage property or persons, then you got to have an inspection, meaning a certified arborist has to make a determination whether that tree is dead or dying. I don't have any certified arborists on staff. The county has one. So if you really want to, you can always hire your own tree expert for them to come out and make a determination on the tree. Sometimes it's just visible, to the eye. If the tree is bare and it's got big holes in it, and it looks like it's dying, it's easy to tell. But my guys won't make that determination without an inspection. So I'm not sure what the angle of the question is. So I hope I explained all the scenarios. If there's another one, feel free to ask the question in a different way.
Yes, sir. And I guess on the aspect of trees, if a tree falls in the street that's on your property, who's responsible for the removal?
If the tree falls in the street, our public works or contractor will come and get it out of the street, but they're only going to get it out of the street, put it up on the sidewalk. Then it's that property owner's responsibility to have that removed. And any portion that's on their property needs to be removed. Now, if where they put the logs, if it's an impediment to foot traffic or maybe someone that's has limited mobility, then they'll have the contractor come back and remove it off the sidewalk. If you expect that sanitation will remove that, then you're gonna have to pay a fee. That's called a bulk pickup. So if you have a tree that fell, you cut it up and you put it out on the curb thinking the county is gonna pick it up, you gotta be ready to pay a fee. They'll come out, make an assessment, hang a red tag on it, and then let you know what that fee will be. Minimum is $50. Of course, depending on how much debris you have there, it could escalate.
Yeah. And along that line, we actually had a question, and then we'll circle back to another question that was asked. Is there a coordination or partnership between sanitation and code enforcement? Like, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we get a call and it says, hey, there's some tree debris on the curb, it's been there for 2 weeks now, sanitation hasn't picked it up. Typically, you know, we'll send that to sanitation as well, but we'll also in a service request. And one of our guys will go out and have a conversation with the property owner or responsible party. Let them know that there's a fee required to have this removed. We'll give them a link. We have all of that in our in the equipment we carry. We have a link to sanitation that can take them to the website. They can pay the fee on the website, get a receipt, and then that goes into the queue for sanitation for pickup. Now, sometimes it's delayed, you know, and we all know that sometimes, you know, our household trash is delayed slightly, but it's not because they're ignoring it. Typically it's because of the volume. But yes, there is a collaboration. We have periodic trainings for all of our new officers to make sure that they understand how that works with sanitation. And it works the other way too. If sanitation goes out to pick up your household trash and you have some appliances there for them to pick up, you know, they'll usually send us a message and say, hey, can you send somebody out to, you know, 123 Main Street? They have a bulk pickup, but they have not paid a fee. Can you let them know that there's a fee? And of course, if they decide they don't want to pay for it, then we start writing citations and consider it just open storage that, you know, needs to be removed. So yes.
Couple more questions and then let everybody get to dinner and sleep tonight. So I'm gonna circle back to your neighbors. Your neighbors selling fish or barbecue plates or have cars in their yard. Is that a code enforcement violation?
Cars in your yard, yes. Meaning, let me talk about vehicles first, and then I'll talk about the fish fry. So vehicles, you have to have current tag, registration, and decal on any vehicles that are parked on your property. You also have to have them parked on a hard surface, an approved hard surface. Gravel is not an approved hard surface. Now, there are properties out there that have had gravel for many, many years. So if we can, you know, determine that that's the case, typically they will be able to keep the gravel. But you can't park on the grass, you can't park on the dirt. Got to be on a hard surface, have to have current tag, decal, and registration. The vehicle can't be missing any part of the powertrain. I mean, you can't be missing a motor. Can't be on all four flat tires. The only way you can keep a vehicle that's inoperative on your property is in an enclosed garage with the door down. So if it doesn't meet that criteria, it can't be parked on site. Now, the fish fry, the barbecue, typically it's a little bit more difficult to enforce on residential property because usually when you visit there, those folks are just saying, hey, we're just having a cookout, you know. And if people want to give me a donation for the church or for, you know, the next cookout, you know, why shouldn't I take it? So it gets into that. What is enforceable when you see that barbecue or fish fry, say on a vacant commercial property that you know is not in business. So that's what we call illegal or transit sale. And you have to have a permit or a certificate for that. And you have to, there's some prerequisites. You got to have a letter from the property owner. You have to have a certain number of parking spaces that are designated for you. You can't be in the public right away, but more than anything, you have to have that certificate. And the certificate is only good for 30 days. So if you see somebody posted up at the convenience store has been closed for 2 years, you know, selling barbecue every weekend, you probably need to call us. You know, hopefully we'll catch it, but if we don't, you know, we'll depend on you guys to report it to us.
And then as we wrap up, a couple questions. When a violation is reported, are they given a reference number? Is it automatically given, or do you have to ask for it?
Yes, they should be given a service request number, and you can call back later, give them that service request number, and they'll give you a case number. But yes, you should be given a reference number anytime you call in a violation.
And I guess last but not least, as you acting as you're currently deputy director, is DeKalb County looking for a director of code enforcement, or that's your position?
Whether they're looking for one or not, I don't know. They hadn't told me yet. The way this all transpired from a deputy director standpoint is, remember when I started, beautification was still in play. And there was a director's position for beautification. The deputy director position for code enforcement came under that umbrella. But before they could hire a director for beautification, they basically took keep the DeKalb beautiful and move it over to sanitation. So now you no longer have a beautification department. So as a result, you no longer need a director of beautification. So again, we're standalone. If they plan to hire a director, hopefully they'll let me know first. But right now, I'm in charge of the administration. And if you need anything, got any questions, or you're just not getting the results you need, by all means, give me a call. For right now, it stops with me, and I'm happy to take your calls or try to resolve your issues.
And I know I said that was the last question, but I see this question keeps coming in, if you don't mind.
No, I'm here. So
okay, it's asking. I guess it's a county question, or I just asked, why can't we have cameras in areas that have regular dumping areas?
Well, it's not that you can't. I just think they haven't dedicated resources to that. Now, when you think about it, with the number of dumping areas we have in unincorporated DeKalb, that could get to be pretty expensive. Almost any dead end street or off the beaten path road, you find dumping. That's unfortunate, but then that speaks to, I guess, the mindset of folks in our community, or people that come in our community to do work. They feel compelled to dump their trash there. I would love to be able to, have something in place so we could catch them. The police would love to as well. There are some what they call flop cameras that kind of capture license plates, but they still don't necessarily capture the actual dumping because it goes from frame to frame to frame. Video, of course, would be ideal. So I guess they just haven't decided that that's where they want to put their resources. So again, you guys, you elect the officials. So, maybe you can get on someone's calendar and let them know that that's a priority.
And you actually got a compliment here. Ms. Yves Grayer, she states that you're very knowledgeable and hopes the county department takes a proactive approach to code enforcement.
Thank you for the comment.
And so just to wrap in due time, just to wrap up, because it looks like questions are just coming in back to back. Just how can people get in touch with you to continue asking these questions? I guess
as we speak, I'm putting my email address in the chat. So please feel free to use it.
And again, I want to thank you for coming out tonight. Got another one. Good job, Mr. Hardy. Coming out tonight and speaking with the community. I think this is very helpful for our community understanding how code enforcement works and what code enforcement is responsible for, and also what we can do as a community to help code enforcement. Because that's what we want to come to at the end.
Let me give you just one last
yes, sir.
Plug or recommendation. When you ask what can the residents do, residents or voters, there are a couple of things that are difficult for us right now, and we need some legislation, primarily legislation that's specifically geared towards Airbnb or any short-term rentals. Another problematic area for is pad splits or illegal rooming houses. We need some strong legislation on that, and businesses that refuse to cooperate, and we've issued cease and desist orders. We need some hammer to actually be able to close those businesses down. All of those are legislation or ordinances that are being considered. So when they come about, just hope folks will support it, because we really need it right now. Currently, we enforce the short-term rentals and the illegal rooming houses under our zoning ordinance, which is fine, but it's so prevalent now. We need some language that speaks directly to it, and the solicitor continues to echo that. So I'm just trying to put that plug in since I have a platform.
Yes, sir. And that may next week we're actually talking about housing, not directly related to that, but along those lines. Well, the 29th, we're talking about housing along those lines. So we definitely need legislation to help us push forward with this progress, not only community members and code enforcement. So we will be speaking about that on the 14th. If you would like to join us also again, just to listen in as a participant. But we definitely appreciate you coming tonight and sharing the insight, also sharing your contact information so the community members can get in touch with you, because it looks like we had a plethora of questions tonight, and that's a good thing.
Okay. I hope I got to them all.
Yes, sir.
If I didn't, please send me an email.
Yes, sir. And we may send over an email and compile all the questions, send you an email, one-hand email, and then send it out to everybody that registered for the night. And that way we make sure all those questions get answered.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And then from here, we are going to move into a poll and about next week. And then Dr. Rice will close us out tonight. And thank you everyone for the questions. And thank you, Mr. Hardy, for participating tonight. And our first poll question is, how did you find out about this this town hall? And I give you a couple minutes, individuals, a couple minutes to complete that question.
If you guys don't need me, I'm gonna leave if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. And thank you for coming out tonight.
All right, no problem. Take care.
And the purpose of this question is really to find out how we can inform other community members about what's these town halls that are taking place. As I stated earlier, we will be having a housing town hall around HB Bill 1093 on the 29th. And also, if you found this informative, please share it with your community members through Nextdoor, knocking on doors, or sharing a conversation, so we can get this out and we can make sure our community is well informed about the issues that are concerning our community. And I'll give like another minute to make sure that everyone has a chance to fill out the poll. And then, as always, as we did before, we will share the results just so everyone can see transparency in place on the polls. And it looks like we hit a stopping point, completely filled out. So majority of the poll was the email that was sent. 80% was from the email, then 13% was from a friend was told, and the other one was 7%, and that was explained in Nextdoor, and that was explained in the chat. It was Nextdoor, so the other was. Thank you for that. And then the next one is in regards to next week's like you said, next week, the 29th town hall. And if you take a couple of minutes to fill this out, are you aware of the investors that are purchasing homes in Southern DeKalb? And that just gives us an idea of where we need to, if we need to explain what's taking place, or people kind of already have an idea. When we go into it on the 29th, we know where everyone stands as far as knowledgeability around the institutional investors buying properties in Southern DeKalb. And I will give a couple of minutes to fill that out. And it looks like we've hit a stopping point. Looks like majority of the participants tonight are aware of the investors buying homes in Southern DeKalb, with 92% saying yes, no. So it looks like we have a point of reference of understanding what is taking place with the investors buying homes in Southern DeKalb. And at this point, I want to thank everybody for the comments of the compliments below. I do see those compliments. And I will pass over to Dr. Rice, and she will close us out for coming out.
Thank you, Maurice. I appreciate that. I'm just going to take a few minutes to wrap up. Number one, I just want to say thank you to, first of all, Mr. Hardy, because Ms. Hines originally was scheduled to come. That's who we advertised. The fact that we got the director of the department is even better. And you all had many, many questions. He answered every single one of those questions. So a big thank you to Mr. Hardy. I want to thank Ms. Hines also because she originally agreed to do it. And she's the one that solicited Mr. Hardy to come and take her place. I also want to thank Mr. Farrell. He is another code enforcement director, and he was very helpful in helping us understand the process of code enforcement better, which enabled us to ask questions that, brought out information that I think was helpful to all. And then, of course, our host, Maurice Rayford, thank you very much for what you did. I also want to start recognizing some people who come on frequently, or who have been with our movement for quite a while. So I want to mention Rhonda Mangum, great questions, Maddie Tatum, Lloyd Nurse, who's been around for a while, Shirley Hill, she is president of her HOA, Sybil Bolivar, and Eves Greer, who, by the way, is a gentleman, not a female, a man. Thank you for being, steady people in support of us. I want to also highlight the forum, the next town hall that we will have, because we're having these town halls to connect with you. You've identified what issues are of concern to you through Nextdoor, through answering our poll. And so on Wednesday, June 29th, we are having a housing forum. Did you all get your assessment recently? Was your assessment higher than it's been? Definitely from last year. Has it been steadily increasing? Well, that's all due to the investor crisis. So we have a speaker coming from the Atlanta Regional Commission. We have a speaker from the Georgia Municipal Association. We have another speaker who will be coming to talk about the legislation HB 1093, which deals with investors and what local governments can do about them. So ladies and gentlemen, please plan to attend and tell your neighbors and your friends and anyone else you can think of, because Southern DeKalb is the #1 hotspot in the United States for housing and investors coming to purchase our housing. And we want to talk about the impact that it will have on you. So finally, the last thing I want to say is that we're doing all of these things, and it takes money, of course, and resources to make these things happen. I want to thank all of you who have given some to us. And in the effort to be transparent, one of the things that we had asked money for was a billboard. We discovered that the cost of the billboard from pre-COVID to now has doubled, 100% increase. That's why you're not seeing a billboard up there. But we're still working our way towards that. And in the meantime, we're doing other things. So you're seeing signs out there now. And you're going to see more of us being out there addressing your needs. So I'm going to ask that you go to our website, which is cityofdekalbga.com, cityofdekalbga.com. And I see here from Lloyd that signs are awesome. They are awesome, I think. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for attending this webinar. Remember to give to the cause so we can help you even more. And we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday, June 29th at the People's Housing Forum. Thank you.